Last week we spoke about how to share your story and some of the important values of sharing your own story, because we want this series to not just be about hearing stories, but about the people of our church going out and telling these great stories that are within our church. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. My name's Josh.
I'm Dave.
And we're part of the leadership team here at Freedom Church, and we just want to share some of these principles with you. And I want to start with this verse in 1 Peter 2 verse 9. It says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light."
Come on.
That he is the one that called us out, and that we are there to declare his praises. So I think that's part of telling our story, is declaring his praises.
Yeah,
saying,
absolutely.
this is how good God's been
Come on.
in our life. So we're going to spend a little bit of time in this video talking about some of these principles today.
Absolutely. And one of the ways in order to tell of all the incredible things God's done is we've got to get real. And one of the ways that we get real is we've got to be willing to be vulnerable. And vulnerability it's an interesting one, because for some people it's something that's very natural and very easy. For others of us it's hard. But when it comes to telling our story, true vulnerability, what it actually does is it builds equity with the person that you're listening.
Yeah.
It invites them in to more than just the facts of something that happened. It invites them into the journey of what went on and your own personal authenticity and power within that. It creates a connection. And one of the really incredible things that it does is that vulnerability actually leads to vulnerability as well. And you wanted to share when you were telling some of your story.
Yeah, I've met this guy a few times, and I got the opportunity to share the gospel with him. But as I was doing that and telling about Jesus, I also talked about some of the difficulty that I've been in my own life and my own story, and about how Jesus had helped me in overcoming that. But the really interesting thing was that as I shared about where I had almost fallen and I'd been broken, and things that I'd really gone through that was almost like the hardest parts of my life, to this person I really knew, it really took him back.
Yeah.
And he said, "Since you've been honest with me, I want to be honest with you." And he talked about something in his life that he was going through.
Wow.
And there was no chance that he would have shared that with me as someone he hardly knew.
Yeah.
But because I'd gone first in being vulnerable
So good.
and almost made that admission, it allowed him to do the same. And so our connection and our relationship immediately went to the next level because of that willingness to be vulnerable.
It's so amazing, because if we think about social media, I think so many people we're putting on a front, aren't we?
Yeah.
Everybody's got their perfect Instagram life, or their we often want to show people either only what we want them to see or what we think they want to see. And when we're vulnerable, we cut beyond that. We go through those sort of masks that people create, and we get to what really, really matters.
Definitely. I think the next thing that we want you to really think about when sharing your story is to embrace the darkness.
Come on.
Now, that kind of sounds, a little bit ominous and a little bit dodgy, but what we mean by that is that if you think about, when do stars shine? And often a response is they shine at night, but actually they shine all the time, but you only see them in the darkness.
Yeah.
And so there's something about when we share the truth of who Jesus is, and the goodness and the salvation and the hope that we've received, it's so much more powerful in the context of the darkness.
Come on. Wow.
Just like a star.
Yeah.
And so if we then refuse to almost embrace the darkness, so we don't want to talk about that part of our story because it's too painful or it's too difficult, then you don't allow the hope to be able to shine through in the way that it can. And so there's something about saying, I'm going to go there.
Come on.
I'm going to share the things that maybe someone's going to think less of me, or maybe that's going to expose me for failing, or something that's going to expose me for being broken. But that allows the light and the hope of Jesus to shine so much more brightly. So we've got to be honest. We've got to go there and say, this is what happened to me in my story. Because if we just share about where we are now, I think it adds to that veneer that we were talking about, where there's not that sense of realness.
I also think when we share just where we are now, it also creates, for some people, a sense of an impossibility of getting there themselves as well. And we can actually inadvertently create this almost like amazing picture of who we are, whereas actually when we embrace the darkness, when we're vulnerable, and people then suddenly think, man, that's where I am, but look at where you are now, it's possible for me. It actually helps bring hope in a greater way.
And the thing is people relate to that much more than the kind of like happy ending part of our story, because the reality is that people that don't yet know Jesus often are walking through trial, difficulty, they're often walking through things with self-doubt, of problems that they're navigating, and so it's that they think, oh, I can now relate to you because you've been there too. You know, we've got to remember, it's not that we have to kind of pour out our mess for every person that we're meeting whenever we're sharing our story and say, well, you know, you just need to know about, I used to be an addict, you know. It's like, it's going to be appropriate to share that in certain moments with the right leading of the Holy Spirit, and that's a really important factor, is listening to where God's directing you within those stories. But you've got to understand that, you know, showing a picture of a kid achieving well in class, that's a really nice thing to celebrate. It's like, oh, they've done well and they're top of the class, etc. But knowing that that child was on the edge of exclusion a year ago
changes it.
Embracing that part of the story all of a sudden gives a whole new context to your story.
Sometimes I think, you know, it might have taken me 5 years on a particular journey, but then when we get to the end result of it, we expect others to get there in 5 weeks. And I think sometimes when we remember the journey and we embrace the darkness, it actually gives us a bit more grace and faith for one another. And one of the ways that in order to be able to do this is we've got to be people that really learn to track our story. If you read the Bible, God continually reminds the Israelites through the Old Testament, and then even people like Paul is constantly writing to the new churches, remember what God did, because we're so immediate as human beings.
Dave,
we are so immediate.
I'm telling you.
You know, and there's something about being able to track your story and remember it. And again, for some of us, that's going to be more natural. But I would say for all of us, we need to put effort in to be able to start to track and chapter our life and our journey. Ask yourself the question, can I really articulate the chapters of the journey I've been on? Do I understand where I've come back from? Josh made a really interesting kind of thought before we got on camera, and that was that for you think that one of the reasons that God has given us the principle of the Sabbath, in other words, taking a day off a week where we're not working, where we're not doing what we've got to do, is actually to give us space to reflect. To reflect on God.
I think so. To reflect on the goodness of God, to reflect on our story. But also when we're in those moments of sharing our faith or getting to share what our relationship with God means, we can lean into things of what we believe rather than what we've experienced of God.
That's so good.
And I think that there's something of learning from that, and that's what we really want to see happen through this series.
Yeah, and one of the ways that I think you can do that is to, you know, bring it into your life in a way that you see it. So one of the things we do in our family is, you know, the pictures we have on the wall, the things that we put, the things that we remember, the stories we tell our children, take us back on that journey. Something so powerful. And last little thing on this, if you're leading someone, so often we can lead somebody in the immediate of where they're at and forget that actually the answer's often in our story. When we remember, what did God do? What did I have to go through? What did I learn? Where did I get it right? Where did I get it wrong? What did I change in? And then start to help apply that to other people's lives. This is the power of stories. So many times when God says to the Israelites, remember, he's like, don't do it again. You've already learned it once. I've given it. There's something so powerful in these ways that we can track our story, be vulnerable, embrace the darkness, and really see life change.
Absolutely. So we want, again, for you to start thinking about what could you do this week to be sharing your story.